Mr. Dubazani, may I confirm that you are present, please? Program. I'm so sorry, Professor Kano, may we hand over the program to you, please?
Dumelang colleagues, thank you for making the time to attend the 3rd annual African Languages and Indigenous Knowledge Systems seminar. I'm going to call for the welcome. I'm going to call Ntate Xolani Dubazani, who is the Deputy Director, Academic and Technology Support, to welcome us as we start the seminar. Ntate Dubazani. Is Ntate Dubazani in?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Am I visible?
Not yet.
Maybe still traveling to Pretoria first. KZN. Okay.
Can we have someone from the technical team to assist? Ntate Dubazani is still not with us.
Xolani, if you unclick the camera.
I've already unclicked it.
You have done it. Okay.
Yeah, it's on. The light is on, but I don't know why it's not. I'm not coming out.
Okay, I'm going to ask that we don't stress about it. If we may ask you to please proceed with the welcome, we'll appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Program Director, Prof. Kuno Grace, Director, Leadership and Transformation Scholarship Change at UNISA. Let me take this opportunity to recognize Professor Siputa who is our acting deputy registrar at UNISA, responsible for the regions and student affairs. Regional directors present from various regions. KZN Regional Director, Dr. Joyce Mieza, my line manager. I recognize also the KZN management team, including the staff, as well as students leadership, colleagues from our sister universities, colleagues who are joining us virtually from various departments, including KZN HRDC, as well as the various departments, government departments in KZN. Lastly, but not least, our guest speaker, Professor Nobuhle Hlongwa, who is the Dean, as well as the head of the School of Arts at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, which happens to be my alma mater as well. Colleagues, good morning. Sanbonani. A warm welcome to each and every one of you. Thank you for honoring the region by joining this very, very important third annual African Languages and Indigenous Knowledge System seminar hosted by KZN region of the University of South Africa. Today's theme is, I quote, Embedding African Languages and Indigenous Knowledge System in higher education teaching, and learning, close quote. Indigenous knowledge should be valued, preserved, revitalized, and also protected. Higher education, in particular the leadership, has got a responsibility with regard to the protection and preservation of the indigenous knowledge. Therefore, higher education to take a lead in its preservation and protection, because it is the hub of knowledge production and the generator of the leaders of tomorrow. I'm quoting from Prof. Ngulube, Dube, Mhlongo et al. In 2015. Higher education must legitimize and validate indigenous knowledge as a pedagogy strategy in order to transform the higher education landscape, which has hitherto been dominated by hegemonic Western pedagogic ontologies as well as SP methodologies. Higher education in South Africa has failed to generate and to solve the problems confronting society because it lacks appreciation of indigenous ways of knowledge. I'm saying this as well because you will recall that here at UNISA, for instance, immediately after our merger in 2004, and the years that follows. At UNISA, there was a big department called Department of African Languages. But immediately after the merger, that department was closed, and so many of the colleagues who were working there, they were displaced. Some of them came into the regions, and that on its own was a sign that maybe at that time, our university leaders were not cognizant of the importance of the indigenous knowledge systems and languages. There is a growing discourse that demands that the acknowledgement and inclusion of indigenous knowledge system in education is important. And therefore, there is a need for university to rethink indigenous presence as well as aspiration in designing and interpreting the curriculum. The inclusion of indigenous knowledge in the curriculum of higher education may also expose students who are bound to be instrumental in shaping and sustainable development agenda in order to value intergenerational experiential knowledge, which has been passed down from one generation to another. Ladies and gentlemen, my task is not to be a speaker this morning, but my task is very simple, is to acknowledge and welcome all of you, and in doing so, recognize the fact that in our midst, we have got one of our ladies of the province, Professor Nobuhle Hlongwa, the girl from the KZN region or province, which in our language at UNISA, we call it the regions, but regions are nothing else but provinces. He is the one who will give you more information as we proceed with our discussion this morning. As you do that, as she does that, I would like to invite all of you to take note of all the issues that she will be raising as she proceeds with her presentation. Note down anything that you would like to raise, especially during the question and answer session. Immediately after her, I know that Prof. Ziputa will respond to her speech. As he does that, I also invite you to also note down all the issues that even Prof. Ziputa will be raising, so that we will make our own discussions a fruitful discussion this morning. With that being said, colleagues, we are all warmly welcomed, and I am inviting you to join us and enjoy this morning session, which is our third annual African Languages and Indigenous Knowledge System in KZN. I thank you, Madam Prof. Kuno. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ntate Dubazane, for the warm welcome. Again, thank you for acknowledging university management, our guests, and everyone who is in attendance today. It's also worth noting what you said is even more significant, because some of the issues that will be shared by our speaker today speak to quite significant issues around African languages. We are sitting in a very difficult position, and I hope that as we engage today, we begin to find answers to some of these challenges. Before I introduce the speaker for the day, I would like to call Professor Zengele, Professor Thulani Zengele, to say a few words of welcome as well, and then we get to into the program. Professor Zengele.
Good morning, Prof. Kuno and colleagues. Especially here, I was invited by the Regional Director, Dr. Mieza, and I greet everyone here. I'm just for the fact that I'm not in the program, but I was just requested to make a few notes regarding my presence. I'm currently presenting from the KZN region, my home region, which I left in 1985. So presently, I'm the head and director of the Curriculum Transformation Unit, a directorate that was initiated by the DHET with UNISA. It's funded by UNISA. It came after the continuous cries from South African students from 1976 up to 2016 for a transformed and quality curriculum. And then basically, in a nutshell, what the unit is doing, in response to that, we developed in 2018, this was set up in 2018, we developed and designed the first curriculum transformation course for the academics, which is focusing on the transformation pillars around the curriculum. So there are 5 learning units. The course was meant for academics. It focuses as under learning unit 1. It teaches or helps academics to infuse the transformation principle of how to infuse African epistemologies and philosophies into the curriculum as they develop new modules and programs. 2, it looks at how to infuse the principle of diversity and diversity and inclusion into the curriculum. The 3rd one is currently what is going on right now, how to infuse, how to infuse elements of transformation, transformative assessment when designing programs and setting exams, whether they are is formative or continuous assessment in open and distance learning. The 4th one is on infusing technologies into the curriculum, becoming aware of what the students are exposed to and how the use of technology is enhanced for our students in the environment that in which we work. And then the last one is to do with monitoring and evaluation of a transformed curriculum. So the first batch of a cohort of academics, they were supposed to be 40, they were 55, started in 2020, and again in 2021 it was a 6-month course. Then later on we reviewed it, it became a 3-month course, 2021 and 2022. But in 2021 we decided now to design another course based on the very 5 principles of transformation, basically now for the first-year students at UNISA. But we said we're going to pilot it with the student leaders and the stakeholders in student support. And the course was designed and launched on in September 30 this year. But this one we decided not to take the students' time. We decided to roll it out, not as a course like the academics are doing, but to roll it out as a MOOC. So the MOOC consists of 5 learning units, each taking not more than an hour. So a student can complete that in 1 day over 5 hours, or on 4 or 5 days or less, taking 1 unit a day. So this is the reason that now the course has been rolled out. They started with about 23 students enrolled. It's a self-enrolled registration MOOC. And there were 23 during the first week, but now they are well over 500 or so. So for this reason that now we are preparing now for a better implementation, a rollout of the MOOC to more students in 2023, which is the reason we started with our road show at the Midlands in Rustenburg. From there, we went to Polokwane and then Sunnyside. Now we're currently in KZN in Durban, and from there next week we're doing East London and conclude with Cape Town. From there we'll come back to campus and then go somewhere early in January and look at the input by the students on how they've received and how now they understand the real essence of a transformed curriculum, the basics, what they see there. So I think from there we'll deliver something that is much more effective so that we can be ready for the rollout to the entire university from 2024. Academics are doing the same thing. So we're producing now curriculum transformation. We are going to do the very same, the very same spirit to other academics by conducting workshops. Students will also do that as well because we've got student leaders around here. So that is why this our initiative that we are currently busy with blends so well with the Learning Unit 1. I think today I will not go further. Anyone who's interested in it will give you a link to the MOOC so that you can see the activities there and provide us with feedback as we go along strengthening the course. We will be the first university in the country to have this kind of output when it comes to a formalized structure of curriculum transformation. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Professor Zengele, for providing us with that information. In my opinion, in my humble opinion, UNISA is doing amazing work around transformation. Thank you. Now to the introduction of Professor Nobuhle Hlongwa, who is going to be the speaker for the day. I'm quite excited to introduce her to you. Professor Hlongwa is the full professor. She's currently Dean and Head of the School of Arts in the College of Humanities at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She is C2 rated by the National Research Foundation. Professor Hlongwa is an established researcher with many publications, and some of her publications are written in isiZulu, thus contributing towards the promotion and intellectualization of isiZulu as a language of scholarship in higher education. Her book entitled Ukuhlelwa Kolimi, translated as Language Planning, published in 2019, is still the only book written in isiZulu in the area of sociolinguistics. She has co-guest edited several special issues of Alternation Journal. Professor Hlongwa is a representative of the University of KwaZulu-Natal in the Community of Practice for the Teaching and Learning of African Languages, which forms part of the devolved governance structure of Universities of South Africa. As of January 2023, she will assume the role as the chairperson of the Community of Practice for the Teaching and Learning of African Languages. She has served as a member of the Ministerial Advisory Panel on the Development of African Languages in Higher Education. She is the treasurer of the African Language Association of Southern Africa. She is the principal investigator in several national and international research projects funded by Henry Mellon Foundation, the National Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences, and by the European Union. She has supervised 13 master's and 8 PhD students to completion. She has examined 13 master's and 15 PhD theses from UNISA, Rhodes, Wits, Cape Town, UWC, Stellenbosch, UniZulu, and University of KwaZulu-Natal. From this brief bio, it is clear why Professor Hlongwa is the speaker on this particular topic. Welcome, Professor Hlongwa, and over to you. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kono, for the warm welcome. I am honored to be with you this morning, colleagues. May I request, if it is possible, for Joe to share the presentation? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joe. Colleagues, I couldn't say no to the regional director when she requested that I be with you this morning. So it was very, very difficult because, like, we come a long way. You know, in her previous portfolio is our director of library at UKZN. So that is why I had to be here. But, like, more importantly, Chair, the topic of Indigenous knowledge and that of African languages is close to my heart. So, observing all the protocol, I would like to acknowledge all the executives of the University of South Africa who are here this morning, all the key people behind the planning of this third annual African Languages and Indigenous Knowledge Systems Seminar today. Colleagues, I acknowledge all of you. I'm not going to mention each of you because I don't want to leave anybody, but I would just like to observe all the protocols. If we can continue, Joe. I'm going to structure my presentation this morning in this way by beginning with an introduction and look at some two theoretical frameworks that will frame the presentation. I will look at the African languages in IKS in the pre-colonial and also colonial periods, and also look at IKS in higher education, teaching and learning, and also come up with some recommendations and also the conclusion. And carry on, John. Thank you. Colleagues, the purpose for this presentation this morning, in line with the theme, is to assess the progress that has been made regarding the transformation of the humanities and social sciences in South African higher education, with particular reference to African languages and indigenous knowledge systems. I think when we were welcomed this morning by Mr. I just want to get the name by Mr. Kalani. Just want to get the surname of Kalani.
Dubazane, Prof.
Kalani Dubazane, yes. When Mr. Kalani Dubazane was welcoming us, he did mention that at UNISA there was that displacement of African languages, which actually took place, especially immediately after the merger. So that was the scary period. I think in most of the universities, this did not only happen to UNISA, there were also other universities where African languages departments were actually closed down. But there has been some work in terms of resuscitating those departments so that they work and also deliver on the transformation imperative of the country. So what I'm going to do as well, I will give a degree appraisal to the establishment of the Africa Institute in Indigenous Knowledge Systems at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and also look at what its purpose and what it is doing, which is to endeavor and also to advance the use of African indigenous languages as homegrown philosophies to the global pool of knowledge. So that will be adding to the existing Center of African Indigenous Knowledge System that is currently being led by Professor Kaya at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. For this presentation this morning, I argue that in recognition and of the plural and multivocal nature of the knowledge domain, the project to develop indigenous knowledge system cannot be meaningfully pursued without taking cognizance of the local languages, the local indigenous languages, as it is in these languages that the cognitive, the philosophical, and other frameworks of the local people are embedded. So that is the argument that is being presented this morning. And indigenous knowledge systems that have been historically marginalized as part and parcel of colonization need to be foregrounded in order to explore their potential contribution to world knowledge. We cannot only rely on the knowledge which is coming from the West, but we need to recognize all the knowledges. So I will use the anti-colonial theory and humanities as the theoretical departure point as part and parcel of this presentation. The anti-colonial theory calls into question the nature of the traditionally accepted colonial experience, as well as the consequences thereof. So this is as a result of the research that has been conducted previously by Day in 2012, and also in 2026, and also Wayne in 2008. The encounter between the colonizer and the colonized was a very, very painful one. It was characterized by epistemological violence. So you will find a lot of that in the publication by Nyamjo 2012, And it did not only end there, but there was a loss of land, mental colonization through education in particular. Ways of knowing and languages of the colonized were devalued. And even today, African languages are still devalued in higher education, not only in higher education, even in the private spaces, in the private domains, African languages are still being devalued. So this is in spite of all the legislative documents that are available at national, within the African continent, international, which seeks to acknowledge and promote African languages. But like these languages are still being devalued. I don't even want to go to the publishing sector. It's even painful when you go to that sector. So the anti-colonial theory rejects the universalizing tendencies of mainstream Western knowledge traditions. Knowledge serves certain interest. So that is away in 2008. Anti-colonial theory critiques the social and the power relations embedded in the production, organization, validation, and dissemination of knowledge. So more of that, like you will find when you read Day's work, 2006. So anti-colonial theory calls for radical transformation of the conceptual frameworks, the syllabi, the language policies, the research methodologies used in the academy. I am happy that at UNISA, the center, the Transformation Center that was spoke of like this morning, seeks to address some of these transformation issues in its various facets as it has just been shared this morning. So whilst we are engaging with IKS, as we engage with IKS, that does not mean being uncritical in terms of our engagement with our tradition. This is where the humanistics is actually useful. We do need to enter into a humanitic circle in order to interpret our traditions, since humanitic point of view is historical and perspectival in nature. So to interpret African languages and IKS with reference to foreign theoretical frameworks is to use sight of the humanitic circle. Danina Budere in 2011, in his book entitled Africology, Philosophy and the Wholeness and Epistemology. So he writes a lot about this and also about the humanities and how we need to use these frameworks. So this calls for use of indigenous languages in knowledge production and dissemination. So far from the nostalgic return to the past, this is part of an ongoing critical dialogue by means of which knowledge is constructed. Language is key to this process. So when we don't use African languages as languages of teaching and learning in higher education, we are actually continuing to devalue African languages. We are saying African languages are not good enough to be used as languages of teaching and learning. But English or maybe Afrikaans are the languages that like we should use, or even French in other cases are the languages that like we should use for teaching and learning. So we need to start using the African languages. And when we start using African languages, the terminologies will be developed. That will be the opportunity for us to develop all those terminologies, because in the past, there have been arguments that like we are unable to use our African languages because like there is no terminology and so forth and so forth. That has now changed. We cannot now hide behind the inexistence of terminologies, because every day we are actually coming with new terminologies for the various disciplines in the entire academy. So looking at the African languages and IKS in the pre-colonial and the colonial periods, I do want to share briefly that in terms of the education and provision of education in Africa, education in African societies was holistic. It was part and parcel of the process of socializing youth to become competent and be responsible members of society. So research done by Farouf and Michelle alludes to that. Linguistic competence was highly prized, and this is evidenced by a number of specializations that were available in languages and the arts. So if you look at Barr's work in 1981, you will get a lot in terms of how linguistics competence was actually prized. So Danina Budere again in 2011 highlights the centrality of the work or speech, that is the living language in Indigenous African thought. Again, Barr 1981 also argues that speech was considered to be of divine origin. As such, speech was ranked higher than other forms of discourse prior to colonization, including the written word. So prior to colonization, and even now, like our African societies are oral societies. Most of what we do, it's done orally. Yes, the writing period came, but like our societies, our oral societies, what we say is very, very important. Gadama in 1975, in his work, argues that language is central to human understanding, as it is through speech that one can bridge the distance between the different horizons of understanding. With the advent of colonialism and the slave trade, African indigenous knowledge systems and languages were systematically undermined in order to erase African contributions to history and knowledge production. I was very excited a few weeks back when we had the annual Mazisi Gunene lecture at UKZN. We had Professor Zoda Motsa, who is from UNISA, who gave the lecture. And I like the way she actually titled her lecture. She said, Emma Siswain, Usekaya. And in her presentation, she alluded to the fact that our heritage is still here. Our languages are still here, even though with the colonialism and everything that happened with the devaluing of all these languages. But as the African people, we have maintained our languages. We can still say here is Sizulu, here is Xhosa, here is Sotho, here is Chivenda, here is Swahili. So those languages are still there. So we haven't lost much. But what happened was that during that time, all those knowledge, all our languages were devalued systematically. That was done systematically, so that like we don't contribute to modernizing our society and so forth. So coming to issues of conversion to Christianity or another dominant colonial religion, a Western type education as well as fluency in European languages were considered to be the pinnacle of civilization and enlightenment. So if you're not fluent in English, awufundanga. So in isiZulu, they will say that awufundanga. So that was done systematically. That was done systematically. So that like if you speak in your African languages, which means you don't know anything because you speak your African language. You haven't studied anything. So that was the mentality. So colonial education was geared towards inculcating the values and tastes of the colonial society into local young people in order to train them to be of better service to the colonial powers. So if you read Ngugi wa Thiong'o's work in 2005, you will learn more about what he says there. And right now, I have seen what happens, like when you go to the Senate of different universities to convince our leaders about the importance of African languages, especially when you propose maybe language policies. The people who will reject or who will have many questions, who will not want to have anything to do with African languages, in many cases, are the African languages people. So, which means the colonizers did their work well. They did their work well. So we still really need to do a lot of work in terms of decolonizing our minds. We still need to do a lot of work in that sphere. My colleague Gregory Kamendo, may his soul rest in peace, also has done a lot of work in this area when we talk about issues of language policy and planning, and also in relation to what colonial education did. So is Ruatabagu in 2011, so is Woodson in 1933. So the main task here was to assimilate and to control. That was the most important thing, assimilate and control. So there were a few exceptions though. Education in Africa throughout the colonial period was carried out through the medium of the European or foreign languages. Again, citing Kamwendo and Ngugi wa Thiong'o. So there is still the case. So this is still the case even today. We haven't moved much in terms of using African languages as languages of teaching and learning in many universities. Almost all the universities in South Africa. English is still the language of teaching and learning. It's still the language of teaching and learning. In spite of all those reports that have come, that have indicated how African students are failing in universities, how they are struggling, how they are not participating in teaching and learning, we haven't done much to address that situation by recognizing their languages, the languages that they know best, that like they should also be part and parcel teaching and learning in higher education. So Africa remains the least educated continent. So works by Zeleza 2002 allude to that. And there is still a long way to go in terms of addressing this issue in the African continent. As consequences of the colonial language policies, we have seen a marginalization of our African languages in the academy. There was creation of elitism. So we see violation of constitutional rights. So many South African people have rights, but they don't know about these rights, especially the language rights. They don't know much about them. How many cases have you come across where people will go and report that their language rights have been violated, coming from our African people? How many cases that we can count and say, here is a case, my language rights was violated, and how has the case been handled? Ordinary men and women of the village are unable to influence the discourse of human rights. So Zeleza 2006 is saying that. So if we go to the villages, to where we come from, men and women there they use their African languages. They use their Chivenda, they use their Sizulu, they use their Xhosa. How do you engage them in a language that they don't understand? How do you start to engage them? So, which means like you don't see them. You use the language that they don't understand. You do not see them. You do not acknowledge them. The use of African languages in education, if we start to use African languages in higher education, we will be democratizing access as well as contributing to the development of the nation's human resources. Work by Chambo 2005 and Wolf 2010 allude to this. And there is a great need to do this, because you will recall that as universities of higher learning, at some point, we have been requested to open up access to as many students as possible. And we have done that. Many universities have opened doors to as many students, and many of these students are relying also on the NSFAS. But like, whilst we have opened those doors to as many students as possible, have we then transformed what we teach so that it talks to the quality or talks to the nature of the students that we have in universities? So the failure to develop Indigenous languages for the purposes of scientific and scholarly discourse means that universities in Africa are not well equipped to harness Indigenous or local knowledge systems, which are deeply embedded in communities, the values, in their ethics, in their philosophies and ways of life in general. So citing work by Day, by Gandolfo, by Nabudere, and also Zaleza in this. Ngugiwa Thiong'o, again, 2005, notes that when IKS are studied and coded in European languages, local communities, the original experts and custodians of these knowledge traditions, are disempowered. So for how long are we going to continue to disempower our people? In the end, local communities have to learn about their knowledge systems from foreign scholars. They must learn from the foreign scholars. It is not fair. So the quest for integrating IKS in the transformation of the higher education, especially teaching and learning in the sector in general, by no means amounts to a rejection of other knowledge systems. But we need to recognize what has been systematically devalued. Consistent with an inclusive Indigenous epistemology, as well as the humanitic and emergent nature of African knowledge traditions, as Nabudere puts it in 2011, it is rather a quest for the recognition of the interpenetration of different knowledge traditions and their ongoing and dialogic relationship. We need to do that. Indigenous African knowledge systems are dialogic, they're humanitic, they're fluid, and they're emergent. So as we engage with our communities, because that's the other important thing that we need to do as universities in terms of our key category of work. Whilst we do teaching and learning, whilst we do research, community engagement is one critical area that we have not done justice as universities. We need to start improving on that. And as we start to improve on our community engagement, we need to be prepared that we need to engage our communities in the languages that they will understand. If we don't do that, we will continue to engage people who will speak their language. And again, we will be looking at assisting those who are actually maybe better placed or who are actually even better positioned than those people who don't speak the language that we use as the language of academia. So when we engage our communities in those community engagement activities that we do, terms such as ibandla, such as ingxoxo, lekgotla, inkundla, isigcawu, baraza, just to mention a few of these, all point towards gathering of human beings in order to engage in a conversation to discover truth. Obaba bahlala esigcaweni, badinga izindaba. At the end of it all, they must come up with truth in those conversations. So Indigenous knowledge systems recognize the multiplicity of knowledges existing in all communities without imposing one knowledge tradition as superior to others a priori. So this has always been the preferred epistemological framework in the indigenous societies. Danina Budere 2011 refers to a Gigala famous proverb, which is amagesi sikomo, which means to support, which is loosely translated as no one has a monopoly on knowledge. It translated as no one has monopoly to language. So when we acknowledge those indigenous frameworks, we are acknowledging all those different types of knowledge. So communication between the different knowledge traditions can only be effected through language. So that is why language is key. The indigenous languages are key in this. I do also want to continue to cite Danina Budere, where he says it is through language that one enters the life world of another. Hence, the development of African languages that are spoken by the majority of the population is essential in order to bring about the true human understanding. As it stands, we don't understand each other that much. As people, we don't understand each other. Imagine today if our program director was using her language, and I'm using my language, and all of us were using our languages, but like we're able to understand each other. So that's what we need. If we don't do that, we will continue to have languages that we will say those are lingua francas, because like those languages will be used at the expense of the other languages. So in the African continent, Kiswahili is the lingua franca of Africa, because that is the language that is most spoken in Western Africa. And even here in South Africa, we'll be introducing Kiswahili soon in schools. I was fortunate to be part and parcel of the UK's delegation that visited Tanzania in July this year, where there was a celebration of Kiswahili Day, because like UNESCO has given the 7th of July as the World Kiswahili Day. So there were celebrations, week celebrations of Kiswahili in Tanzania. And whilst we were there, our Honorable Minister of Basic Education signed a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Education in Tanzania that South Africa will soon be opening and teaching Kiswahili in schools, because this is the lingua franca of Africa. Can you continue, Joe? So what then do we recommend? What's the way forward? It is important to validate African languages and IKS at the highest levels of higher education institutions. Publications in local and regional journals that use indigenous languages, African languages, should be encouraged and rewarded. We need to do that. If we don't do it, there won't be value again, and people won't have things that will be carrots that will attract them to publish or use their languages as languages of research. This will rupture the political economy of knowledge production that will reward knowledge systems differently. We need to do that. We were in the Alasa conference in September in Western Cape, and there were many publications, or there were many presentations rather, that were made in African languages. Whilst the African Languages Journal, which is SAJA, allows scholars to publish some of the publications in African languages, a decision was taken that there will be a call for people to now publish all those presentations in the African languages. And that call is currently out. Because like we did not want to say, let us have a special issue of SAJA, because like we need to normalize publications in Indigenous languages, in African Indigenous languages. So that was the decision that was taken. So we look forward to also publishing houses opening up this and taking up this challenge of the publications in the different subjects in African Indigenous languages, not just literature only, but discipline-specific material in the African languages. So to ensure that like terminology and vocabulary that is being developed is sustained and put to use in universities, institutions of higher learning should encourage students to write their dissertations and theses in African languages in fields that fall outside the languages, such as agriculture, nursing, psychology, to mention a few. I'm happy that at UKZN this year we do have a student who is doing his PhD in law, who is currently writing in isiZulu. So that will be the first PhD in the law that will be written solely in isiZulu. We have quite a number of these within the arts, within isiZulu, within education, also in isiZulu. So we've got quite a number of these. I don't want to mention them, but in the discipline, which is law, you know, the language of law in South Africa is English. We will be having the first. So not only are we having are we going to have this thesis written in isiZulu, there has also been terminologies that have been developed in the law field to assist, so that like there is terminology to use as you continue with the writing. And what we have done, I don't want maybe to to blow the horn only for isiZulu, but I must say that the people who are working behind the scenes to promote isiZulu, I must say they have done an excellent work. Why I'm saying this? As I was working on this PowerPoint, I wanted to check if I could present all of this or translate all of this into isiZulu. And yes, my laptop was able to do that. So everything that is here, I can present it in isiZulu because of the work that Google Translate has done with the people working in isiZulu. That you can do. That is also through excellent work that has been done in terms of coding and in terms of the corpus that has been developed for isiZulu, which is the largest corpus in Africa for isiZulu, for the African languages. So the corpus that we have developed at UKZN for isiZulu, it's now superseded that one of Swahili, which is a language, which is a lingua franca of Africa. And that is excellent work, and we continue to work on that. So once you have your corpus and once you have all your terminologies that you have in the system, it's easy to come up with all the apps, some of which we have. I'm not going to talk about that because that is not subject for today. But like you have those apps that will help you to be able to navigate the language, use the language on your cell phones and so forth. So that's very interesting. So that's what we need for all the African languages in South Africa, not just isiZulu, but like we continue to promote isiZulu, we continue to use it as language of teaching and learning. So Indigenous experts from communities should be appointed as honorary staff and be invited to give lectures and partake as joint research supervisors in the areas of expertise. We need to do this. In the arts, we are already doing this, and we are calling these expert artists in residence. We bring them, they work with us for 2 to 3 months in the area of expertise, and they do wonderful work. We need to continue to do this as universities and bring those honorary people and being those people in our communities to be part and parcel of knowledge production. And in so doing, we will be acknowledging the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge that they will be coming up with to share with us. And we have signed various memorandum of understanding with other institutes as well that work with us in the social work and the psychology fraternity and so forth, in the medicine fraternity. We do quite a lot of that. Comparative interdisciplinary projects cutting across countries should be initiated to study indigenous languages, e.g. linguistics, as well as IKS. Multidisciplinary degree programs across departments and between African countries need to be facilitated. I'm just not recommending this. I'm already doing this. We have already signed some memorandum, a memorandum of understanding with the University of Tanzania in Dar es Salaam to work on Swahili and isiZulu. So this is already happening. Currently, we have begun our project on the trilingual dictionary, which will be isiZulu, Swahili, English. So this is work that we currently do, but we will continue and do more work in this area. Maybe that will even lead to joint degree programs as I'm recommending them. Lucrative scholarships, bursaries, postdoctoral fellowships should be made available to incentivize the study of African languages. Whilst this is available across the board, and I know the National Research Foundation has some of these, and universities internally, they have this, but we need to have more of this that will support the use of African languages in higher education. So as a way of conclusion, Program Director, I have argued against the use of African languages in higher education system, and also acknowledge whilst most universities have developed their language policies, there are still challenges in the implementation and monitoring level in most of the universities. There is a new language policy framework that many universities are actually working on. They're trying to follow that framework so that they assist them in the implementation of their language policies. So in most institutions, language and curriculum transformation to embed IKS are yet to receive institutional buy-in. So we are calling upon the universities to come on board and work on this. As you at UKZN, I think we will be offering a postgraduate diploma in Indigenous knowledge systems as of next year. So I'm calling for interdisciplinary approach towards the study of Indigenous knowledge systems. It cannot be meaningfully pursued whilst one is located in one discipline. So this is the challenge for African universities to play a role in developing IKS so that it becomes part and parcel of the global world knowledge. I thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. What a feast, thank you. A round of applause for Professor Songwa. I think your presentation is amazing, but it's also sad, to hear, that we are sleeping on the job. We are sleeping on the job. We are pursuing things that are so far because we've been told that they matter more than what we already have. Our languages are our treasure, but we continue to, pretend like we don't have languages. Before I, give another talk, my role is to facilitate. So I'm going to invite Professor Sepota Moloko, who is going to be the respondent. Before he comes through, I want to give a brief introduction. Professor Moloko Sepota is currently the acting registrar, the acting deputy registrar, UNISA. He was formerly an academic attached to the School of Languages and Communication Studies and moved to the Academic Development Unit at the University of Limpopo before he joined UNISA administration, serving as the Northeastern Regional Director. He served as an active executive member of South African Folklore Society as a treasurer for Northern Region and national offices. He was also an ESCO member of Higher Education Learning and Teaching Association of Southern Africa. He was also the convener of the Northern Region Foundation Programs Special Interest Group, and also he was a member of the African Languages Association of Southern Africa. He emphasizes, okay, I don't know what that is. His keen interest in higher education foundation. He has a keen interest in higher education foundation programs, language and development. He's also interested in language in education and advocates for the significance of indigenous knowledge systems. These interests are attested to by several conference presentations that he has given, articles, journal articles, and books that he published in these fields. Apart from his normal academic activities, Professor Moloko Sepota is also involved in national bodies pertaining to foundation provision in South African higher education. He holds a D.Litt from the University of Stellenbosch. Professor Sepota is an appropriate respondent, as you've heard from his brief bio for this talk on African languages and indigenous knowledge system. Professor Sepota, over to you.
Thank you, Program Director, Professor Kuno. Let me try to be safe and simply say all protocol observed. Program Director, I don't know where you learned what you were just saying about me, but I think maybe that's what it's in the papers out there. I want to thank Professor Hlongwa for her wonderful presentation. And what I think I heard from Prof, you said a mouthful. We heard what you were saying. And what I personally think I heard you saying, Prof, you were arguing against the use of African languages in higher education, not only against the use, but what I also think I heard from you, Prof, it's clearly indicating their centrality as far as our transformation of the curriculum is concerned. And that perhaps that's the reason why, Prof, you also thanked Prof Zengele for the wonderful work that he's doing, that of trying to bring in the African flavor in our curriculum. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll remember that there was a report that was submitted to CHE, I think way back in 2006 or 7. And that report recommended that our curriculum should be overhauled because our curriculum was too foreign. Our curriculum was irrelevant towards the needs of the community. Our curriculum did not serve the interests of our students. Unfortunately, CHE decided otherwise, and that report is yet to see the light of the day. But Prof, again, I think what I heard you saying, you also indicated the importance of IKS. I agree with you, the importance of IKS in our curriculum. But again, as Prof Kuno indicated, you lamented the fact that we are sleeping on duty. We are still more than 28 years, more than 27 years into democracy. We are still unable to come up with a tangible decolonized curriculum. But again, you also, Prof, went on to share with us the good work that you are doing at UKZN. starting first with the establishment of the IKS. I think, Prof, that is a wonderful project, that one. When Prof. Kaya started, I think he involved UL, University of Limpopo, he involved University of Northwest, he involved University of Venda. And unfortunately, the three seem to have dropped on along the way. We are grateful, Prof, that you are still carrying on with that institute. Prof, you also again talked about the importance of using African languages as languages of learning and teaching. Something, a debate, Prof, that has been on the agenda ever since the massification of education around the 90s, 92. That's why, Prof, you correctly indicated that we opened our doors of learning and many students were admitted to our institutions. And rather than producing graduates and students who would go out and contribute to the economy of the country, the students ended up turning learning into a career. And that is not their problem, Prof. I agree with you. Perhaps as leaders, perhaps as educators, we failed our students, we failed the community, we couldn't transform the curriculum to be in such a way that it makes sense to them. To such a way, in a sense that what they study in class would not be in contradiction. What they do in class, when they go out there, would be something that they will associate with, will be something that they will be able to implement, will be something that they will understand. Prof, I agree with you on those things. We did not do justice to our students and we left them. Yes, Prof, language, to say that we can say it's important, we can never overemphasize that. Language is a powerful tool to be used by mankind to navigate the surroundings, both physical and natural and psychological environments around him. And as Professor Zengel indicated, that in his transformation of the curriculum, they are also trying to include the philosophies of Africans. Those are best carried, according to my understanding, Prof, those are best carried in our languages. Africans always have their way of interacting with nature, always have had their way of curing diseases, always have their way of doing many other things. Now, with the introduction of the foreign curriculum by foreigners who always had a foreign goal in mind, our education system does not make sense to our learners. We dumped everything that belongs to us. We dumped everything that could shape our thinking, everything that could shape our philosophies, our worldviews, so that we can be what we are supposed to be. And I believe, Prof, as you indicated, language plays a major role towards the socialization and development of our students. That is why somehow, Prof, you talked about the African education. That was very relevant. That was very important. I remember very well when we grew up, we used to sit around the fire to be told stories. Even today, stories that I was told during those days, I can still recite them word by word without even going to any place where they are documented. Perhaps that was the risk, that is the type of education you are talking about, Prof. The type of education that is holistic. The type of education that will end up producing a graduate who will be able to negotiate whatever type of situation he is faced with. And for me, I think this was mentioned by Ndatitu Wazana right from the beginning, the issue of the importance of education. For me, education, culture, our languages, and IKS, if I were to use an impossible term, I would say they are sides of the same coin, even though the coin will have two sides. But I believe All these things will be sides of the same coin, and then there will be things that could be used to help us build the identity, but not only build our identity, something that could help us to grow towards eventually self-actualization, something that I believe, Prof, is lacking within us, something that scholars like Defu will talk about: psychological poverty, psychological features of poverty, lack of self-esteem, lack of self-identity, and graduates that are far from being self-actualized. How do we achieve this, Prof? You gave us an answer. Include languages, include IKS, what we were taught. I believe once we lose identity, we lose direction in life. And it makes sense now that our country is on fire. Nothing is coming all right. We are gradually losing our youth to drugs. Youth is gradually becoming, if I may put it this way, is gradually becoming engendered species. We are losing them to drugs because we cannot give them direction. We don't know who we are. How do we tell them who they are when we don't even know who we are? No wonder, Prof, that you indicated that in our Senate and whatever, our leaders are the ones who are actually fighting against the use of these African languages and the like. And I like what Professor Ndlovu Kacheni used to say about the use of education, wherein we are exposing our youth to foreign culture, wherein we are using foreign languages, as you rightly indicated. Those foreign languages are actually exposing our students to a foreign culture that is actually alienating them from who they are. So we are far from thinking of getting what we do right, and the type of the curriculum that we still use, the type of the curriculum that we are mimicking from our oppressors. Even though we keep on saying we are decolonizing and we move one step forward and 100 steps backward, saying we are decolonizing, perhaps, Prof, we may not be sharing a common understanding as educators of what decolonizing is. The curriculum that you are mimicking, the curriculum that you are still using, is it's used for me as a strong weapon to breed a sense of inferiority amongst ourselves, to breed that sense of not knowing who we are, and to bring that sense, above all, to bring that sense of self-hatred. We hate ourselves so much that we cannot even use our own languages as languages of learning and teaching. But what I want to differ with Ntate Duwazane, and to a certain extent, perhaps, Prof, with you, is the fact that we cannot keep on blaming others. It's high time that we should emulate you. What you are doing, the project that you talked about, and that you are still planning to do around traditional, around African languages. That's exactly what we should all do as educators. That's exactly what we should all do. When I say educators, I'm not only referring to those colleagues that are graduated, those colleagues with certificates. I'm referring even the parents at home. You said one important thing about the parents at home, that we're isolating them from the debates of what is going on, because we keep on using English, knowing very well that they don't understand English, they wouldn't understand us, that they wouldn't be in a position to contribute towards learning. But the informal education that they continue to give at home is still far much better than perhaps even what we are doing at tertiary institutions. And I think that's where we need to start, Prof, where we should ensure that our languages as teachers, whether at home or in school or wherever, our languages should be put at the center. But unfortunately, how do we even put our languages when we no longer have families? Because that's where we should start. If you look at our families, most of our families, Prof, with due respect, most of our families are hostels. We are in a family, we can't even sit around the table for a meal. If we do, all the parents and maybe the kids will be on their gadgets. The father will be submitting something urgently that is needed at work, so is the mother, and the kids will be on their SMSs and what have you. We no longer have that quality time where we can engage, where we can use our languages and do what we have to do. And if we go back to the white paper on post-secondary education and training, it's instructing us. It demands out from us that we improve and broaden our curriculum in such a way that our curriculum is relevant to include learning that is professionally and socially important. You ask yourself, how do we ensure that the learning that we provide will be socially important, socially relevant? I think, Prof, exactly what you said. That's where we should come up with our languages. That's where we should come up with our indigenous knowledge systems. Yes, Prof, I agree with you. We continue to devalue our languages because we don't know who we are. We continue to devalue our languages because, as you indicated, we still think that those that are fluent English are the ones that are educated. We continue to devalue our languages and our culture because we believe that those who came with foreign cultures and languages are the ones that are better, are the ones that are civilized, are the ones that are important. So those are the things, Prof, that will continue to devalue our languages. Those are the things that will continue to instill that sense of nothingness, that sense of lawlessness, even amongst the top colleagues in government circles, in education, wherever, because of the issue of self-identity, because of the type of the curriculum, because of the type of training that we went through, we keep on mimicking those that showed us where to go. And it will take a long time for us to bring back the issue of decency, to bring back the issue of respect in our cultures and in our languages. And Prof, again, you talked about the issue of learning our IKS from foreigners. It is true, Prof. They come here, they do research amongst us, and they go out and write, and we learn from them. I can give you a good example of a book written by Konig, a foreigner, which is called The Pedi. That book gives the history of Pedi people, written by a foreigner. And here one, Prof, thinks in terms of a Zimbabwean proverb, which says, until such a time that the lion learns to tell its story, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. It makes no, it does not come as a surprise, Prof, that we keep on undermining who we are. We keep on undermining our culture. We keep on undermining our tradition because a foreigner came to tell us who we are. A foreigner came to tell us how we live. A foreigner came to tell us how we think. A foreigner came to tell us how we should approach our everyday challenges. And I agree with you, Prof, that such things continue to silence ordinary men and women. I believe, Prof, from where I'm sitting, the continued use of this foreign curriculum is the worst creation, as you indicated, the worst creation of elitism, not only elitism, Prof, but I think the worst creation of slavery, the worst creation of a system that continues to destroy who Africans are. Worse than the Bantustans and reserve camps where we were at some stage relegated to. That's why, Prof, you are even now talking in terms of coming up with a common language that will be relevant to most African speakers, a language that will be used by all. Because time and again, after we have been condemned to reserve camps, we think, no, I'm a Zulu, I'm a Pedi, I'm a Tsonga, I'm a Venda, therefore I cannot learn what others are. I cannot learn other languages outside where I'm sitting, because we were made to believe, we were made to fight against each other, and that is still continuing. And if we continue to use this foreign curriculum, we are in no way better than apartheid opponents, because we perpetuate what they left us. Even when we are in charge, we still continue to do that, just that we still continue to close gates for those that could do better through our education system. We continue to think we are better than those perhaps that did not go to university, those did not go to a college, those that did not go to any school. And what we are doing, Prof, I believe we are just perpetuating that. I think, Prof, I agree with you that our local communities could be empowered by learning IKS. And I want to congratulate you, Prof, on what you're doing. And you talked about, again, important thing of terminology development. I know the Department of Arts and Culture used to have a project for all languages in the country, where in universities were developing terminology projects, but coordinated by Arts and Culture. I'm aware, Prof, that there is a terminology terminology list developed in maths, in not IKS, in maths, in law, and in ICT, and in health. And yeah, I used to be part and parcel of those projects, and when I left, we had developed almost 4 terminology projects by then. That is very much important, Prof, because we have been told that our languages are underdeveloped, something that is far from the truth. How do you say languages are underdeveloped when we have got Bibles written in all languages? You read every Bible, that is purely scientific language, very difficult. If you can translate that book into your language, it doesn't, to me, say our languages are underdeveloped. It's just that we are made to believe that they are underdeveloped. We are made to believe to look down upon them. We are made to believe not to even think that they are worth to be used. I think, Prof, let me stop it here. Let me just stop here. But thanks a lot. I learned so much from you. And I think if we can be able to imitate what you are doing at UKZN, maybe perhaps, Prof, one thing that you left that is very much important is the Zulu newspaper. I know that, again, I think it was Pencil that started this project of African languages newspapers. The rest, I believe, are now dead, but the Zulu one and the Xhosa one are still going very well. It's something, Prof, that we should be proud of. And thank you, Program Director. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Professor Sepota. Thank you very much for the response, Raleboga. I'm going to now open the floor for discussions, colleagues. I hope you were, taking down your questions for Professor Hlongwa and also for Professor Sepota. Now it's time to raise those questions, colleagues. Any questions? Comments? Anifuna ukukhuluma nami, colleagues.
Some of us do, Prof. Kuno. Xolan Tobazane here, Prof.
Yes. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Prof. Kuno. Thank you, colleagues in particular. Thanks, Prof. Hlongwa, with a thought-provoking presentation that you have made and also responded from Prof. Sepota. Indigenous knowledge debate around our country, especially within the universities. It has been a topic for a very, very long time. But what worries me is that if you look at most of these universities, especially today, at a leadership level, it's being led by our own brothers, our own sisters, who are also Africans. But it seems to me that the issue of translating the academic work into these languages that is spoken by the majority is taking a very, very snail pace. And I keep on asking myself as to why is this happening? Is there a real will to really go as far as transforming curriculum, or is something that we enjoy when we are in gatherings of this nature, like the one where we are today. Afrikaners, immediately after attaining freedom, first thing they did was to ensure that they transform curricula into a language that was understandable to them, to their children. And it is for that reason that Afrikaners prospered. If you look at our own country in terms of development that took place during their time, it is clear that key to it was to transforming curricula into their own language. The question that arises, why are we not doing that? Why are we still theorizing about it? Why are we only talking about only converting questions during the examination where questions are translated into our languages, but when we are teaching, we don't do that. Why are we doing that to ourselves, to our kids? And right now, it's embarrassing that some of our kids cannot really pronounce our own languages in a proper way, because there is this belief that English is king, English is queen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm reading the chat before I give over to another colleague to ask. In the chat, one colleague is acknowledging the profound quote from Professor Hlongwa. The quote goes, "The development of African languages that are spoken by the majority of the population is essential in order to bring about true human understanding." I think I agree that this is one of the profound quotes from the talk given by Professor Hlongwa. I see that Me Mbuyisa also has a question. Me Mbuyisa.
Excuse me for interrupting. Nazipo, will you mind muting your microphone, please? Thank you.
Can we have Me Mbuyisa, if you still wanted to ask a question, you have the
morning,
floor.
colleague. Actually, it was not a question, it was a comment which I've put on the message. I just wanted to comment. Prof mentioned that the presentation that she was doing, she could also do it in Zulu. And that's a good thing, because a few months ago, I attended a conference where there was Microsoft Teams. And they were showing us that they could actually translate from English to Chinese, most of the languages, except for African language. So when we ask, why is it that we can't speak in English and then it translates to Zulu? They said because there are no meetings that are held on Microsoft Teams speaking Zulu. They need to get a certain number of those words for that language for them to start now a program where they can motivate to say, okay, now we've got the number of people that are actually held in meeting in this language. So now we can start translating. Then anyone can speak to Chinese and then it can go to Zulu or English. So when Prof mentioned that, for me, it was like something that I'm looking forward to, because it's also going to help when we're speaking in English, that those who cannot understand, they can actually read at the same time.
Thank you for that. I think it's an important comment, and maybe when Professor Hlongwa responds, she can speak to, why that is the case, and what are the implications of that for the development of African languages into languages of teaching and learning. Any other comments? I wanted to at least have 3 questions before I give over to Professor Hlongwa to respond. Anything else, colleagues, so that we can hear her response? Going once, Going twice. Okay, colleagues, I'm going to ask a question. Professor Hlongwa, I'm so grateful that I've been invited to chair this session. Otherwise, I would not have come across your work. So when you were presenting, you know, academics, we do that. When you were presenting, I was Googling you. I was Googling you. I was on Google Scholar. And I'm so impressed and so grateful that you have taken on the work that you do. Colleagues, Professor Hlongwa is doing amazing work, and she has published extensively on these questions. I'm going to enjoy reading your work. I wanted to ask, I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment, but one of the things that you said was around how the non-formal use, because we also need to recognize that African languages are used daily as languages of business. Mause teksini uyakhokhela, you use Zulu or Sotho or Setswana. So we use African languages everywhere else, but in formal spaces, especially formal historically white spaces, and the knowledge production space is one of them. So, Professor Hlongwa, you said something profound, and I think it's something that we might want to unpack and begin to think about as we engage in the work around, recentering African languages. You said that one of the reasons why we are struggling, even for us as African language users, we're struggling to bring these languages into the historically white formal spaces is because this was done deliberately. Because with the erasure of African languages from these formal historically white spaces, then we are able to deny or maybe to continue to erase the fact that Africans play a role in contributing to knowledge production. I wanted you to speak more to your findings around, around how we can, inform. I mean, there's a lot of amazing work happening now around excavating, African knowledges and also recentering African knowers. So what would be your contribution in helping us continue doing that amazing work around these multiple excavating projects? I'm gonna now give over to you, Professor Hlongwa, and then Professor Sepota, if you are keen to speak to some of the questions and the comments, I'm happy to also give you space to do so after Professor Hlongwa gives us her response. Over to you, Professor Hlongwa.
Thank you very much, Prof. Konu, for your questions, and also colleagues, thank you so much for your questions as well. I hope I will be able to answer some of the questions. If I'm unable to, I think Professor Sepota will come in as well, Prof. Starting with the snail pace, in terms of addressing the development and the use of African languages in higher education, I think it goes back to what I mentioned, in that in higher education, we as the owners of the African languages, we kind of like, how do I put this? We are not confident enough about our African languages, especially those people who are not in the African languages department, but even some who are in the African languages department. Colleagues, you may not know this. In the African languages departments in universities, these languages were taught in English. When I was trained as an undergraduate student, I was taught isiZulu in English. So that is how big these problems are. So many institutions are still grappling with even that. Because like we are saying, let us use African languages as languages of teaching and learning. Let us develop African languages. Some are even struggling to do that. But like those who took up the challenge at the time when this was addressed, immediately after our merger, they are far now. They are far. That is why, like for UKZN, we can say that like we have done much, and now many other languages are now looking at what we have done, and then they are learning. They are taking lessons from what UKZN has done. On the issue of terminology development, how we should move with it. It's not something that like you do alone, but like it take concerted efforts. For example, at UKZN, and something that like other universities are doing as well, and as part and parcel of our current project, which is called Bakonde, which stands for Boosting the Use of African Languages in Higher Education, which is currently funded by the European Commission. We are actually working with Rhodes University, with UCC, with the Northwest, and key to our project is the formation of university language boards. We call them ALDUs, University Language Development Units. These units are very important because as much as we have the departments, the African languages departments, they have a task, an academic task to do in terms of teaching and also do research. But like when we want to develop these languages as part and parcel of our transformation, we need these departments or these units to assist us. So in the process of developing terminology, whilst Department of Arts and Culture is doing its part, we as universities, because like these subjects, like your sciences, all your humanities, we own these disciplines. We know what is happening. We bring the other expertise from external, but like the work currently happens within the university, within these units. We bring these people. They identify the terminologies that need to be developed. They identify the books, the prescribed books that are being used, and they identify the terms, and then they meet like a series of workshops of coming up with terminologies. And after the terminologies have been developed, there is a series of now working through kind of like there are committees now that verify the terminologies that have been done, and it's collaborative work with your language boards, in our case, the isiZulu National Language Board. So all those people are very important because like they are the ones who kind of like stamp that like these terms we have now checked, that like these terms, we accept these terms in isiZulu, now go ahead and publish such terminologies. So this is slow. If there isn't much support on the Pan South African Languages Board, especially the language boards, if they are not coming to the party, it's going to slow the work in terms of the development of the terminologies. But like we need to do this. We shouldn't stop doing it, and we need not say we're not going to start to use Chivenda because like there are no terminologies in Chivenda. As we use Chivenda, we will develop terminology along those lines. On the issue regarding the translation of either a presentation or of a document, currently there is a lot of there are currently research that is currently being done by Northwest University through SADILA, where they are working on text to on speech to text and so forth in terms of translations and all of that. But again, work that has been done by Google, there are different even NGOs out there that have currently worked on isiZulu, because like I've checked which other African languages are there. I only saw isiZulu. I didn't see the other official African languages, is because like I was looking at, let me see other option. Can I do it in Xhosa or can I do it in I only saw isiZulu and isiBhunu as well is there. That is Afrikaans. So Afrikaans is there, isiZulu is there, English is there. So which means isiZulu has developed, I think the terminology that they have there, the corpus that is there, it allows that like there is the translation between English and isiZulu in that presentation. So I think that means like with the other African languages, we need to work a lot. I think as we've alluded to, so that like there is more data, there are more terms that will allow for the translation. But like even after that translation has taken place, it will still need that human eye to check if it is correct. So as we were continuing with the deliberations, I just sent to Dr. Mirza a little screenshot to say, this is what I was talking about. Just one slide to say, okay, this is what it says in English, and this is what you see in Zulu. And you can see that like in terms of percentage, in terms of readability, plus or minus like 85% correct. So you can see that like it's really working. It can happen with the other African languages as well, but like it will need people to have continuous effort to continue to work on developing and coming up with these terminologies. On the non-formal use of African languages, and also I didn't capture that question well on the non-formal use of African languages, but like maybe Prof. Kono to answer you on the very important subject of the deliberate erasure of our languages and also of our IKS. Important work is currently being done by NIHSS, that is the National Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences. You will recall that like way back in 2011, 2012, our Honorable Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Blade Nzimande, initiated this work of the humanities and social sciences because like he was actually worried at the time, even also worried that like in terms of funding, that like the humanities and social sciences were not funded that well, and came up with that strategy, and then the NIHSS was founded, and it's got many nodes. But like one of the projects that are being done there, they are linked to us going back to who we are, to our identity, getting that that important piece of information that talks about us, our history. So I'm also still trying to engage with many work that is currently being done under that subject, but like there is quite a lot that is actually going on there that we can read, which, for example, there are scholars or poets whose work that we have not engaged enough as academia. For example, the work of Baba Mazisukunene, Professor Mazisukunene, he has written profoundly just about King Shaka in his book Unudumehlezi Gamenzi, or King Shaka the Great. So there has been a translation of that work in isiZulu into Unudumehlezi Gamenzi. There is quite a lot that is just there that talks about who we are. So the whole issue of us not trusting ourselves, not knowing if like maybe what I'm saying, how it's going to be accepted and all of that. It's all being addressed in there, but like we just need to engage with what they have written, what it says about the family. Professor Puta, you spoke about the family, what it says about the family, our traditional families, what it says. So there is quite a lot. I don't know how to start to explain how we engage with this, but like there is, I must say that like there is quite a lot, and a lot that I've actually shared with you today. You can find it in an alternation special issue that we wrote in 2014. And there is also another special issue we wrote in 2016 on African Indigenous knowledge systems in mental health, in African literature, and also in education. So there is quite a lot that you'll also get there where we go deep into addressing issues of Indigenous knowledge. Because like part of who we are, some of the things that we deliberate, that like so that like we don't know about who we are, in many African communities, and like what I'm saying, like you will be able to associate with. Why do we go and consult traditional healers in the evenings? Many people don't want to go and consult during the day. They go in the evenings. And even when the traditional maybe healer comes to your house, they don't come during the day. They come at night. Why? I'm not going to answer it. I'm just going to leave it like that. Why? So it's kind of like answering what I was saying, that like everything that is ours, that is of value to us, it was devalued so that like we think it is not good enough. Whereas we know that like those traditional healers, we need them. They are doing important work. It's part and parcel of our health. But we've got to go and consult them at certain times. They've got to come and work at certain times. Maybe let me stop there, Program Director. Thank you.
Professor Sepota, would you like to respond, share your thoughts on some of the questions?
Professor Kuno, when an expert has spoken, you don't want to dilute what the expert talked about. But I just want to comment on one thing, and that it was on the issue of translation. I'm not going to talk about the reason why it's going at a pale snail. I just want to share my feelings about translation. For me, that it was on a translation is not an answer, and we should not even go that route. I'll tell you why. Number one, if we translate, we are not in any way infusing our culture. We are not in any way infusing our philosophy in that work. We are just mimicking in a better way, if we put it that way, what the foreigners are saying about us. That's number one. Number two, we are likely to lose the real meaning along the way if we were to translate. But number three, and most important one, is what Professor Hlongwa talked about, the issue of a common language. Until such time that we have that common language that we can use, it will continue to be problematic for us to translate, because it will mean translating criminology textbook into almost 11 languages. So it's going to be even costly. Those that are against the issue of introducing our languages will simply say, how do you fund that? So for me, translation, it's a no-go area. But I agree with Prof. Hlongwa what she indicated about the issue of this snail pail of translation. Just one thing to add to what Prof. Hlongwa talked about lastly, the issue of ancestors. An excellent idea for me. It's you look around Easter times. You'll see many people flocking to graveyards, taking flowers there. Flowers don't have any meaning for us as Africans. We use snuff. But if you are seen going there with snuff, you are tempted otherwise. So those are some of the challenges that we are facing, Program Director, in addition to what Prof. Hlongwa said. I think I don't want to dilute what Prof. Hlongwa said. She said a mouthful. And thank you, Program Director and colleagues.
Thank you, Professor Sepota. One comment from the chat from Tatem Kize Are. For me, it is the attitude that as Africans, we believe that communicating in African language is viewed as being uneducated. It's because of lack of pride in our African languages that will eventually make our languages die naturally, as most of us send our children to English schools. So this issue is an everyday issue, is an issue that impacts all of us. And Professor Hlongwa mentioned important things that I won't repeat, Professor Sapota. I'm just going to highlight a few things. The question around traditional healers and how we are secretive around them. It's an important one as we continue to think about, African ways of being, African languages, African everyday, cultural and ritual practices, why they die and why they will continue to die. Professor Hlongwa spoke eloquently around why that is the case. And I want us to take that with us as we leave this seminar. The other question that I think is fundamental as we continue thinking around the work of transformation is the one around translation. Professor Sapota also spoke about it, translation. Translating is such a problem if you want to transform and, reappropriate. It's a problem. So I don't want to say why. Professor Sapota spoke to that and Professor Hlongwa spoke to that, but I feel that those are some of the important themes that we might want to continue thinking about. Before I hand over to Dr. Mayeza, I want to provide Professor Hlongwa with an opportunity to say some lasting thoughts with us, to share some last thoughts with us, and then I will hand over to Dr. Mayeza. Professor Hlongwa, final thoughts?
Thank you very much, Prof. Kano. Nothing much, I think, on my side, but maybe to thank you, Nisa, for organizing a very important seminar of this nature. So I think the issue that you have raised of translation is a big one, because in other cases, you will translate and then there will be back translation to check the authenticity of the work that has been done. So in a way, what we are promoting is that work be done, knowledge be produced in the African languages, and don't wait for work to be translated. There is, yes, a need for translation because there is quite a lot of work that is available, but moving forward, it's better that we focus on producing, on writing in our African languages. So I think if we do that, we will be giving something to our generation, so that when we pass, they will see so and so did this and this and this. I think it is a point, each and every one of us that are here, what is going to be my contribution to transformation, to Indigenous knowledge system, to acknowledging the importance of our Indigenous knowledge system. Look at the television. Look at what our kids watch on television. So we do have our own folklores that through digitization, we can use our African languages and tell those stories and project those on television, and not only one-sided as it is currently happening. So that's what we need. So when we talk Indigenous knowledge systems, all those stories that were told in the fireplace, let us create those platforms that we tell them in the modern way, and where people like to be easy on their cell phones, on the television. So let's take it there through gamification, but using these African languages, something that our kids will also love. Because even in those schools, even in those Model C schools, where maybe they don't do, or they pay lip service to African languages, if we come up with these technologies, if we come up with everything that is new, but teaching in our African languages, they will buy into it. So that will be my last contribution, Program Director. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. I'm gonna now hand over to Professor Joyce Mayeza, who is currently the Director of the region KwaZulu-Natal region, UNISA. Professor Maeza will give thank you remarks. Professor Maeza, to you. Dr. Maeza, sorry, to you. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Kuno. I was about to tell you that I don't receive this time. I know people just try and be saying that they've made a mistake. Indirectly, they are saying it's high time you become a professor. No, I don't receive Prof. Kuno. I am not intending to. But colleagues, let me take this opportunity to thank our speaker, Prof. Hlongwa, for a wonderful talk that we've received today. We really, really are grateful, Prof. Hlongwa, especially because I had to just twist your arm just like that. And obviously, I have been abusing my relationship that I have with UKZN. We really, really appreciate. I also would like to thank Professor Sepota, who is my line manager. I have listened to your response, Prof, and I know now that you do have African languages at your heart from how you spoke today. Prof Zengele, I just grabbed you out of the blue, was like, you are relevant. You are dealing with this, even with our students upstairs at 4th floor. So, but you never said no. Mr. Dubazane, you always come on board. It doesn't matter how I just grab you, but you have been one of those staff members who are always abiding whenever a need arises. I really, really thank you. Prof. Kuno, yes, thank you so much for gracing us. I know that you grace your name, but you've graced us today, especially with your program directing, which went smoothly, and with your title, but you still did an excellent job. Thank you so much. Miss Jo Kosavela and your team, Mr. Dunagazi and Mr. Mjali, you continue to do an amazing job. You hosted this and it went well. And I know that you do a lot of background work in doing this. I also want to acknowledge UKZN community that have joined in support of Prof. Hlongwa, but also who also were very much interested in listening to this. Colleagues, I just want to mention that there are so many UNISA academic staff who attended today. Some they've attended on the Teams and some they were on the YouTube. I really want to appreciate them because this seminar, it's very much relevant to them. I also want to acknowledge UNISA staff, especially KwaZulu-Natal staff, for joining and ensuring that they also participate. It is just acknowledged, colleagues. I also note that there are also staff members from UNISA from other regions, as well as Pretoria, who also joined. You are acknowledged and appreciated, colleagues. I want to quickly just list our external visitors who also joined today. The National Library of South Africa was represented. The Department of Sports and Culture, Department of Sports, Arts and Culture was represented. The Africa Media Online was represented. The SADPMR was represented. Oxford University Press Africa was represented. CIPAL Telecommunication was represented. Commercial Bank of Ethiopia was represented. Funani Africa Advisory Group was represented. GDE was represented, University of Pretoria was represented, St. Mary's Hospital, Marion Hill was represented, MSMM Inclusive was represented, ABSA Bank was represented, Ezibeleni LSEN was represented, Uniting Presbyterian Church in Southern Africa was represented, Johannes Nkosi District YCLSA was represented, DALRRD was represented, as well as Gauteng Department of Education. Colleagues, these may not be the only external visitors that joined, but there may be other visitors that I may have not acknowledged here. I would like to apologize in advance if then I didn't mention your entity or your name today. Thank you so much, Program Director. I would like to hand over back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, colleagues, for gracing the event with your presence. Thank you, Professor Hlongwa, for the profound presentation, and Professor Sapota. Thank you, colleagues. I declare the seminar over.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Prof.
Thank you
colleagues.
very
Bye.
much.
Thank you,
Bye.
Thank you,
Prof.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, colleagues.